Hello. Thank you for partnering with Academic Services in partnership with Parent Academy. We'd like to thank you for your time in order to view this webinar on preparing for the FAST grade 6 through 8 assessment and the best end of course algebra and geometry assessment. I hope that you have a better understanding of our FAST, which is our Florida Assessment of Student Thinking for grade 6 through 8 students, and our BEST, which is our benchmarks for excellent student thinking for our Algebra 1 and geometry students. You'll also get to see a few items for yourself that you and your child can practice for preparation for these assessments. We'll also go over a few resources available to support your students at home. Let's begin our session with an overview of the Florida Assessment of Student Thinking. With our new best state standards came the new Florida Assessment of Student Thinking, or we just call it FAST. Now, FAST is a progress monitoring assessment, and that's for both reading and math. It is administered in pre-kindergarten through 10th grade. So the assessments are taken on a computer. They are adaptive, and that just means the questions get easier or more difficult depending on how the student responds. Each student will see different questions from a common question bank. Now, each progress monitoring session will provide a set of questions that will cover the entire year's benchmarks. Each of the progress monitoring sessions will provide information so that teachers can better help students throughout the year. Progress monitoring, or PM1 and PM2, are given for informational purposes. Now, PM1 acts as a baseline to provide teachers with a starting point. PM2 is a mid-year check to monitor the progress for your child. Now, PM3 will be the summative end-of-year measure for student mastery. So students have already taken PM1 and 2, and the PM3 testing window opens on May the 1st. Now, your student will complete this assessment during that window. The specific dates for your student will be communicated to you by your school. Now, students they have up to 120 minutes on that PM3, but do remember they do have up into the entire school day if it is needed. So please make sure your student is aware of that so that they can ask their proctor if additional time is needed for them to complete their assessment. Two of the most important tools that your student should be familiar with is the calculator and the reference sheet. At the right here on this slide, I have a QR code that you can scan for you to get more information about the approved calculators and the reference sheets for students to use on their assessment. Right now, students should have been practicing with those calculators and reference sheets throughout the school year. Our grade 6 students will use a 4-function calculator, and our grade 7 and 8 students will use a scientific calculator. And these are some examples that you're able to see here on this PowerPoint slide. The first one here, you will see our online calculator that students are able to practice with and that they will have on their assessment to keep open. And then you will see our scientific calculator here as well. It is very important that students are familiar with how to do certain conversions and how to enter the mathematics that they need in order to solve for the problems that they are being given. Many of the formulas and conversions are listed on the reference sheets for students to use. Now, it is up to the student to familiarize themselves with those formulas. Now, take for instance, on this grade 8 reference sheet, the slope formula is given to students, and so is the triangle inequality theorem, as well as the triangle sum theorem. It is important for students not a need to memorize the formula, but to be able to know that it is on the reference sheet and know how to use the formula in order to help them to solve problems. FAST results are communicated by performance levels 1 through 5. A level one beginning to access the content is that performance level. A level two is demonstrating a below satisfactory level of success with the content. Level three is demonstrating an on grade level of success with the content. Level four is above satisfactory level of success with the content. And a level five is demonstrating mastery of the content. The goal is for your students to, of course, be proficient, but we want them to gear and push toward the level four so that they have that above satisfactory level and they're prepared for the next course in which they would enter. Let's move to the benchmarks for excellent student thinking. And this is for our Algebra 1 and Geometry students who will take the best end of course. The best end of course assessment for our Algebra 1 and Geometry students, it does not have a progress monitoring throughout the year. There is only one assessment that is given, which is at the end of the year. The assessment is adaptive to each student. Now, our district has our progress monitoring assessments, which are called our DMAs. Those are given 3 times for the year for students to check in on their growth towards progress in the benchmarks for their course. Now, with our best end of course, our students will have about 45 to 50 items. Now, some of those items will be what is called a field test item, and they will not count to a student's score, but they will see that on that assessment. The best end of course assessment will be administered somewhere within the window of May 1st to May 28th. Now, you will need to check with your child's school to see the exact date that the assessment will be given. For Algebra 1 and Geometry students, they will have up to 160 minutes. But remember, if your child needs additional time, they may continue working up until the length of a typical school day. So be sure that your child reaches out to their proctor to inquire about additional time if needed. Just like the FAST assessment, on the best end of course assessment, the calculator is an important tool for our Algebra 1 and Geometry students. There are many calculations that students will need to do in order to problem solve many of the different items that they're provided. There may be some rounding, there may be a lot of substitutions into different forms of equations and functions, and the calculator, whether it's online or whether it's a handheld, will be quite beneficial for our students. It is important that they're continuing to practice the use of the calculator prior to the assessment so they are aware of which keys in order to use and how to navigate some of the function operations so that they're successful in using it on the test. This is an example of the best end of course reference sheet for Algebra 1. As you can see, there are some formulas for forms of equations, and that is so important for students to understand how do I navigate the different forms of equations to solve the various problems. They don't have to memorize it, but they do want to be able to reference the information on this sheet and know how to substitute in those unknown values and work those. And we always say feed the formula, right? Be able to feed that formula and work those problems out. The best end of course results are communicated by the performance levels 1 through 5, just like our FAST assessment. Our goal is that students are pushing toward a level 4 so that they are above satisfactory to ensure they're prepared for the next course. Now, let's take a few minutes to review the item types that students encounter during the FAST and BEST end of course. Here are a few math expectations for testing. Students must be provided with a blank scratch paper for all mathematics tests. We encourage students to make sure they're showing their work so that they can see their thinking to ensure the problems are correct. Online mathematics reference sheets are available in the testing platform for the students, and the students are prohibited from having any electronic or recording devices on them during the test session. So we remind parents to ensure that students are not having their AirPods and their cell phones, even the glasses that are now able to record. So we always want to make sure that students are prepared and focus in and following the rules of the testing environment. All students have the ability to adjust test settings. So it's very important when a student first logs on to the testing platform, they are able to change the print size, to even change the background color or the size of the mouse pointer. Now, students also have access to computer-based tools such as the highlighter, strike through, line reader, and Zoom. The mathematics assessment platform also allows for the following assistive tools and technology for any student who requires accommodations, and that's per our IEP or Individual Educational Plan or Section 504. That's text to speech, masking, and oral presentation. Now, note, students may be assigned extended time if indicated on their IEP. Math item types include multiple choice, multi-select, editing task choice, selectable hot text, equation editor, matching, and graphic response item display. Now, we will go into a bit more detail as I show you examples of each of those types. For a multi-select item type, the student is directed to select all of the correct answers from the number of options. These items are different from multiple choice items, which allow the student to select only one correct answer. So it is very important that students are reminded to solve the problem or answer the question before looking at the choices. Remember that more than one answer choice will be correct. So read all of the choices before choosing an answer. This is an example of the editing task choice. This item type requires the students to click the blanks to reveal a drop-down menu which contains options to complete an equation or expression, a statement, or any other component. Now, the student will select the correct response from that drop-down menu. It's very important that students are reading the sentence or the statement and thinking about what might go in the blank before clicking to see the choices. The multiple choice item, well, this is a common type of item that students see quite often, and they've seen this on many of their assessments and throughout the year. But students choose one correct answer from the options below the question. This item will only allow students to select one answer choice. This is a graphic response item display, which is just known as a grid. Well, for this type of item, a student will use the point, line, or arrow tool to create a response on a graph. This type of item, it may also require the student to select numbers, words, phrases, or images and use the drag and drop feature to place them into a graphic. This is an example of an equation editor. The student enters a number, variable, expression, or equation as appropriate to the test item, and that's entered into the response box. The student is presented with a toolbar that includes a variety of mathematical symbols that can be used to create a response. The response box may be separate from the text of the item, or it may be embedded within the text of the item. This is a matching item. The student checks a box to indicate whether information from a column header matches information from a row. Now, the number of correct answer options per row or column may vary. Now that you've had a chance to see some examples of most of our item types, let's look at some resources that you can use in order to support your student. The Florida Department of Education has released resources to help teachers, students, and families prepare for the new progress monitoring tool, which is our FAST, as well as our best end of course. I'll walk you through how to access the materials that are currently available. You can just scan the QR code that's right here at the bottom right. Once you land here, you will land at our flfast.org and you will click the Florida Assessment of Student Thinking. Next, you will click on Students and Families. Once on the Students and Families page, you are able to access sample item types for our 6 through 8, as well as best end of course exams. These are some of the items that I reviewed a bit earlier. You will be able to find sample item types for your student to practice. Once you click Take a Sample Test for grades 3 through 10, you will click Continue as a guest. After that, you will need to select the grade and the test that you will need to take. After choosing your grade level, you will see a list of assessments available to view the sample items. As you can see on the screen, you will see a list of FAST. For this example, I've just showed you grade 8, but you will see grade 6, 7, and grade 8. As well, if you selected a higher grade level, you will see the end of course sample items. Also, at the bottom of the FL FAST page, you may explore additional Florida Department of Education assessment resources, and that gives information about our FAST and BEST assessments. This is information that can be found by clicking on any of these links at the bottom of that particular page as shown here. When you log into Focus, it will give you access to reports that lets you know how your student performed. For instance, when you click on right here in the center where it says Florida statewide assessments, you will see a report of your child's performance. Your student's performance report will provide you with the information for each of the testing sessions that your student has taken. You will be able to see their performance level. You can scan this QR code here to receive more information about understanding the reports for families. The Florida Department of Education has also provided the Best Mathematics Parent Resources Parent Guide. This is helpful for you to understand the concepts that your child is learning throughout the school year. Please scan the QR code to receive this information. So here are some supports that is available for your child. Throughout the school year, teachers provide students with great support. So the curriculum support includes things such as interleave practice, which allows students to revisit topics that were learned. So maybe at the beginning of the year, they learned a specific concept. Well, it's important that 2 months later or 3 months later that a student continues to keep practicing on that concept. Even though it was something already learned, they will benefit from seeing that concept multiple times throughout the year. They also have benchmark practice sheets that are provided. Your child and teacher will be working on these as they're building up to the date that they're taking their assessment. There's consistent progress monitoring. There's small group instruction during DI day that occurs at least once per week. There's also supplemental support, and that's based on the beginning of year learning gaps to support closing those gaps so that the student can perform the on grade level expectations. And there's also additional district and curriculum resource provided to allow your students to practice for that end of course assessment. We want all of our students to be successful. So here's some ways that you can support students at home. For our grade 6 through 8 students, they have access to SAVIS as well, which is their core curriculum, as well as Exact Path, which is their supplemental support. Students can log on within the SAVIS platform and view virtual nerd videos that will allow them to continue to understand and practice concepts. And they can also log into the SAVIS to practice on the best practice tests. So there are multiple ways that students can continue to practice. For our Algebra 1 and Geometry students who are taking the best end of course, They can log into their core platform, which is the McGraw-Hill Reveal, and they can practice any of the statewide assessment practice tests that are available. Also available is Alex, which can be assigned by the teacher, or the student can continue on their personal learning path, as well as the personal tutor videos located within the McGraw-Hill platform. Tutoring at the school level is also available. So I like to remind students to please reach out to their teacher to inquire what are the days that students are able to attend to get additional help on certain benchmarks. And as we close, here are a couple tips and strategies to help your child succeed. Always read the math problems completely before beginning to solve. Be sure that you know what the question is asking. Make a model or a picture, draw something, draw it down to think about what you're visualizing that concept or that context is about. Pick a strategy. There are multiple strategies in order to solve some of our problems, so ensure that you know which strategy works best for you to solve a problem. Don't stay on a particular problem if you're having trouble. You can always choose what answer you think is best, mark it for review, and then you can move on and come back. Please remember that it is an adaptive test, so depending upon what you put as your answer, it will predict what type of question, whether harder or easier, you will get next. Always double check your work if you have time and ask yourself, does your answer make sense? Practice previous lessons and review your notes as always, and then finish the test. Make sure you finish the test. Take every question serious. The test is adaptive. All right. I want to thank you again for joining us. And on behalf of Academic Services, in partnership with Parent Academy, we wish your child a successful testing season. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us. Our contact information is below. Cindy Barraza is our K-12 Mathematics Director, and I am Emily Collins, our Secondary Math Supervisor.